Hello everybody, I am here to do a very late night video review for The Lost World by Justin Lee Anderson, which is the first book in the Aegean saga, and this was epic. It was absolutely phenomenal, I must just say that. The war is over, but peace can be hell. Demons continue to burn farmlands, violent mercenaries roam the wilds, and a plague is spreading. The country of Aegean is on its knees. In a society that fears and shuns him, Aranok is the first mage to be named King's Envoy, and his latest task is to restore an exiled foreign queen to her throne. The band of allies he assembles each have their own unique skills, but they are strangers to one another, and at every step across the ravaged land a new threat emerges, lies are revealed, and distrust could destroy everything they are working for. Somehow, Aranok must bring his companions together and uncover the conspiracy that threatens the kingdom before war returns to the realms again. So before I get started in this review, I just want to say thank you to Black Crow PR for sending me this copy. They also sent me over the sequel as well, which is Bitter Crown. And a couple of weeks later, I also got a lovely little goodie bag from Little Brown Books with the Lost War candle, some artwork of some of the characters, and some print on the back, and some like a letter from the author, and it was great fun. I was very excited. It was a lovely gesture that I was not expecting. So I'm going to split this video into two parts, the first part being non-spoiler and followed by a spoilery section, because I have many tabs and many of those are things that are more in depth that I want to talk about in specific. This was inspired by the authors and some of his friends' long role-playing game campaign. I'm assuming it's D&D, but it doesn't explicitly say that. So in the King's Council, as they come together and try to uncover the conspiracy that threatens the kingdom of Aegean before war ravages the country again. Straight off the bat, I knew I was going to love this. It had a healthy dose of explicitives and rash conversation. I was also instantly really taken in by our lead character Aranok, the natural leader of the group, I would say, and I was definitely fascinated by his headstrong, oftentimes stubborn sense of what was right for the kingdom, and how far he pushed these thoughts to his best friend and king, Janice. More on him later. Alandria was such a solid badass type of character. She had this no shit attitude, impeccable archery skills and stealth, and just oozed this don't mess with me mentality. I also couldn't help imagining Vex from the Legends of Vox Machina whenever she was on the page. If you want to hear a little bit more about some specific thoughts on some other characters I'm not going to necessarily talk about within this review in like the non-spoiler section, then feel free to check out my written review on Goodreads. We also had Vastin, who was adorable, such a sweetheart. Was hoping we'd have more of him, but I'm looking forward to potentially more of him in the sequel. We had Samali, the Holy Knight, and Meriston, the monk. They were such a good duo, and I was definitely looking forward, as soon as they were introduced, to seeing them interact with the wider group. They just seemed to have quite a different experience with life that I was interested to see how that would mesh with the others. We had another dynamic duo, Glorbad and Nerea. Glorbad's kind of like a war hero, captain of the guard sort of thing, you'd say, an army captain. Nerea's like a navy pirate person, and they were interesting. They kind of took a bit of time to get warm to both of them. Lily Glorbad, just because he seemed a little more standoffish, but you know, he was clearly battling his own demons. They all had something going on, all had their own past experiences that were still kind of haunting them. So these two I definitely warmed to slower, I would say. So I'm going to go on a tangent now about this particularly one sexuality scene that is so out of context, but if you've read it you might know what I mean. I loved the subtle but natural conversations of sexuality in this. The way that asexuality was described for one character felt like such a vulnerable and honest moment, and it was such a great display of trust between the characters on the road, just learning about each other like organically. I feel like this was when sort of a not so maliciously intent really of conversation came about, and the character that was talking to this character that was asexual then shared that information with someone else, and I just don't think it was their right to do that. it definitely had a conflicting feeling inside of me, because I definitely knew where they were coming from in doing that, but also you weren't explicitly told that that was okay to share. That was information that wasn't your business really. But in saying that, it added more depth to the characters, especially when I was wondering about potential motives and sincerity of actions and reactions, that sort of thing. I also can't fault at all that all of this just felt very honestly human, even in error of character judgment, and sharing information that isn't necessarily yours to share. The layers to this book was just so multifaceted. Like, it literally had me fixate on a particular scene that doesn't have any major consequence or effect on the rest of the story. I just loved that this had me thinking that the characters were real and kind of analysing them in ways that I would think about real life scenarios and people, you know. I think off the top of my head, other than that, but kind of, you know, it's explained itself in a way, and I'm appreciative how people like these characters are. I think the only other critique I would have is that the earlier battle scenes, they got a little bit lost in the excitement of the action. For example, like, I wasn't sure if this monster was still on top of a character for the next move to make sense, and I was like, but in relation to where you are with your opponent, how did that work? Just things like that. This definitely felt like it developed well after a few scenes like this. Either that, or I just stopped noticing it or being bothered by it, and more important things came up. But that was one thing that a couple of times in the earlier scenes of this book I was like, oh, that's strange, where are you in relation to you for that to work? Do you know what I mean? The plot twists were incredibly unpredictable. The connections that were made between our core group of characters and those that were already established, like off of the page, with side characters, was phenomenal, especially as we were being shown, not just told. The magic, the political intrigue was absolutely exquisite. The descriptions of rich or decaying landscape was absolutely... it just made me feel like I was walking these paths alongside these characters. It was just such an immersive read. I adored writing little sticky notes throughout, as you can tell, that I'll talk a little bit more in some detail later on. It was just so good to kind of speculate what was going to happen, kind of put in place like character things that I liked, character things that I didn't like. It was just an excellent book all around, and yeah, I absolutely loved it. Okay, bit of a jump scare. I'm in my pajamas. I'm all like barefaced and squeaky clean now. Honestly, last night I was recording probably like close to 1 a.m. I'm not gonna lie, I had just come in from a night out. And I just wanted to take my makeup off. My phone was like quite low on battery. I had little storage. And I just thought, you know what, I'm happy with how that turned out, so I'm just going to add on the spoiler section for the Lost War here. And that's what I'm going to do. So this particular part is, I'm literally going to go through some of these tabs and talk into depth about some of the plot dynamics, some of the character analysis, and the direction in general, because I had a lot to say, as you can see, and I just want to share some thoughts in a bit more detail than a spoiler free entirely would have warranted. So this half is definitely spoilery. If you haven't yet read The Lost War by Justin Lee Anderson, then do go ahead and stop here and then come back when you have read it. Okay, so let's talk about Janus, or Janaeus. Instantly it reminded me of the Roman god Janus, who is the god of doors, duality, puts in mind two-facedness, right? So I was in the back of my head thinking, interesting name choice, you know, if there is any real connection. Obviously that came into play a bit later, but if that was intentional, which I feel like it was, I thought that was so clever. Like, I really liked that. I feel like only people that were familiar with certain mythologies and things like that might have picked up on that, or had an interest in names in general, because I like is it the etymology, is that what it's called, the meanings of names and words, right? So I quite enjoyed having that sort of chipping away at the back of my mind, thinking, is it intentional, is this going to mean something later on, like, you know, what's the deal, what's the sitch? Talking a little bit more about some of the characters that I mentioned a bit briefly in the spoiler-free section. When we were introduced to Meriston, the monk, turns out not to be the monk, right? amazing. Anyway, I'm gonna go through it as if I've not got to that point yet though. And we talked about Samily, the Holy Knight. They were such an interesting duo to talk about because they just seemed so devout, and the way, I think I've already mentioned this briefly, but the way Samily spoke about religion and faith was just such a beautiful, inspiring thing. Like, I'm completely not religious at all, I'm more spiritual if anything, and she just made me want to believe in her God, you know. She just spoke so purely from the heart. It was so lovely. Meriston already like had me intrigued because he was clearly a really deep thinker, a gentle giant, but like there was something that wasn't quite switched on. Like, you could see that he was suffering from something, like these bouts of melancholy. I was having in mind like some sort of PTSD from the war that they've just come out of, and this grief where he's thought, right, I've not done anything like heroic or worthy in the grand scheme of things. And it was just so sad because he was beating himself up over nothing really, and when you think about it, it was just mind manipulation anyway that was making him feel these ways. And I did wonder when we got to that point, like, did this manipulation of the mind cause, you know, the effect of turning to vices such as alcohol, you know, overabundance of drinking? Like, that's awful. Like, did they already have those vices to begin with? Was it something that was increased? Was it something that just completely begun to deal with it, like the subconscious psyche, to deal with knowing that something's not quite right, like, but they can't pinpoint it? Do you know what I mean? Like, the manipulation, the violation of the body and everything just got so much deeper the more I thought about it, and it was so scary and so sad and fucked up, but it was such an interesting, well written plot, honestly. So as soon as we hit like chapter 13, that situation with the King's Messenger, and Aronok was straight away like, why are they sending that when that's not actually the case? Straight away I was like, okay, a conspiracy. But I don't think at that point I really thought Janaeus, I'm going to call him Janaeus, I'm one between the two. I didn't think it necessarily was him. I was very confused. I'm gonna say like it was something that was irritating the back of my head because I couldn't figure out why this was developing, like what reason this would have been, because it felt almost like it not necessarily was forgotten, but it was obviously pushed aside for bigger plot points, right? So I was like, what was the point? What's going on? And then to learn the depth of this conspiracy later on in the story, just absolutely mind blown. Absolutely, I just could not fathom it. Look at that long girl back there. What are you doing? Yeah, you. What are you doing? She's gonna get herself in a situation, then she's gonna cry because she can't get back out. Okay, she knows, she's learnt a lesson. Oh, the niece, when she started exhibiting powers, I was so excited. I was like, okay, so Aronok clearly thinks that they're hiding like an ill health or something like that, but I was like, no, it's got to be magic. It's got to be magic. If the dad that doesn't know, if the granddad doesn't know, and they've all got this sort of feeling about this mage power, it's got to be magic. And then it sounded so beautiful because at that point it didn't even click that his best friend, was it Korvac or Corvin, that had passed away, was Emelina's real dad. So the fact that she had inherited his illusion magic, just, it was so wholesome. Like, when I finally like peaked on that, I was like, oh, like it made me a bit emotional, honestly. I was adoring the growing, blossoming mentorship relationship between Glorbad and Vastin. I thought it was so awkward and just new and wholesome and fresh. So obviously when Vastin and Meriston became the Blackened, I was like, shit. It literally said they were dead. And I was like, no. And then of course later on, Glorbad dies. What the fuck? I couldn't, it was almost too much for me to grasp, and I just tried to sort of shut it out of my mind, which is awful. But we'd had so much like luck with Samily being around, and obviously her magic actually manifested into time magic rather than healing, but I guess that's kind of like an add-on effect of it. And so when she's not there, obviously there's only so much you can do. He's literally been pierced through the body, through his armor. Murder outright. What can you do? It was heartbreaking. And now to think that Vastin is going to wake up, hopefully he's going to wake up, and not have any memory of any of those events, any of that, and just be like his friend that was, you know, that blossoming mentorship is gone, and he had no closure, no goodbye. And the same for Glorbad, really. Like, he had no chance to see his friend revived and be himself again. Like, it was so heartbreaking. I want to talk a little bit about Conifax, which is Aranok's mentor, teacher from when he was studying at the university. I really didn't like him. Like, he had this arrogance, and it was like talked about later on that it was kind of more confidence, but no, the guy was a prick. Like, he knew he was clever, he knew he was, like, you know, at this particular station, and he was in your, like, rubbed it in your face about it. I don't like how he talked to Aranok, basically calling him boy and, like, laughing at some of his ideas, like smirking, you know, and I just thought it was really frustrating. So when they had this conversation about basically banned books that were locked away in this room that only the elite can access, and that was the masters of the college, only a chosen few, basically. I really liked the argument that they had back and forth. Both had quite valid points, to be fair, about Conifax saying why these should be locked away. Like, what if this is the way that they've created the curse is in this book, and if that was published for everyone to see, what would you do then? But Aranok was like, you know, like, you are hiding information that is, it's free information, like anybody should be able to read, right? Like, anybody should be able to grow their knowledge, and it's down to that individual, that person, how they want to act on it, and then we just need to be ready to make sure nothing bad becomes of it, you know? Like, you can't censor what people were reading, right? It was just such an interesting discussion. Like, it was fascinating. And I also agreed, back to like the arrogance and stuff, Samily was basically saying that Conifax had this lack of respect for Aranok, feels like he's still like above him, and really shot him down at a lot of times when he had some valid points to say, especially like how embarrassing. Aranok's a grown man with his own band of friends that are coming on a quest to do something. They've come to seek out his help, Conifax's help, and Conifax is shooting him down in front of his peers like he's a kid. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just don't like that mentality. It's just really crappy. So yeah, I'd never really liked Conifax. I thought as a character he was obviously worthwhile, very interesting, but yeah, like, I've got another point here. He's trying to be witty and ahead, but he's just being a condescending dick. Like, I just did not like him. I did not vibe with him. Another random little antidote, I really like this metaphor. Samily was being taught by Aranok how to not use up all her power in one bout, and he basically said, imagine you are watering flowers. You have an entire garden to feed. You wouldn't upend a bucket on the first flower, would you? You are the bucket. Your energy is water. You need energy for everything you do, but you're emptying the bucket every time you use your power. I love that. I thought that was very applicable to a lot of situations. There was this conversation. It was like a silent conversation between Alandria and Aranok, where they were just doing the looks. And you know what? It was so perfectly captured how either best friends or those in like a romantic relationship give each other like the silent conversations, the silent communications, like people that just know each other really well. It's all in the eyes and the subtle face expressions. Like, it was so perfectly captured in words. Like, I was like, damn, we've all had those situations, and it was just like they had a whole conversation without saying anything, and it was written perfectly like I could envision it. It was amazing. The relic, what a upsetting and emotional outcome, basically. Like, the whole scene with the young girl being basically, her hand was forced, wasn't it, and she just wiped out this whole settlement with her power. And wow, it was so sad that the heart of devastation, the heart of devastation was the skull of her loved one. Like, oh my god, like, straight away I thought, okay, this sounds like, with all the power that it's got to have create this widespread curse. But little did I know that that's how Janaeus was able to create this mind-altering curse, or mind-altering spell as well. Like, how much power infinitely does it have? Like, that was frightening, of how much control he had over an entire population by completely wiping or editing slightly and subtly what they had remembered, and just replacing him as the forebearer and the victorious hero. Like, it was scary. And on top of that, even more of a violation, that he made like relationships between those that used to be his friends and people he knew, like Alandria and Aranok, he made them romantic when they were never romantic before. So now they've slept with each other, they've had all these intimacies that people in a relationship would do, when originally in the original timeline, I'm going to talk to it like it's like it's Loki, the original timeline, they were just the closest best friends without being romantic, they were platonic. So how dirty and unclean must you feel having had someone in your mind altering you and making you do things that you wouldn't naturally do? Like, that's so upsetting. Like, it just made me feel so sick, honestly. But before we got to that, I was really looking forward to finally being introduced to Mingog, because he always felt like this faraway threat, and I wasn't sure if we were actually going to be introduced to him properly on the pages within this book. So I was really hoping we were going to see the impact of his hand in the following pages, and it just completely, obviously the reveal of the mind altering spell, it completely turned everything on its head, and it was not what I was expecting at all. He's really nice. I honestly feel so awful for him that he has been pretty much trapped there on, was it Dun Edian? He's been trapped there all this time waiting for his friends to come back. Little did he know what was like truly happening. Like, he was aware of all the mind altering stuff, I think, or maybe it was just more apparent. No, he must have known, because they were all friends originally, weren't they? So they knew that, but maybe he didn't know to the level of what Janice was able to do, right? So he was just there waiting for his friends to come back for him. For how long? You know what I mean? Like, the poor guy, damn. And to be villainified on top of it was just awful. Poor guy. And so in the epilogue, I wonder if that messenger, he must be like an someone from the Reavers, right? Because now it's apparent that the Reavers have been allies of Idian for so long, and you know, every time they come in, they've turned it's been made as if they're the enemies. And oh my god, the whole manipulation, I just can't, like, even now, like a few days after reading this, when I think about it, my mind just turns into a tizzy, because how clever, how to be able to craft this story with all these plot points and make it work so flawlessly. I don't know, like, how do you do it? It's amazing. As you can see, I absolutely adored this book. If I haven't said already, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It's one of my favourite reads of 2023. I adored it. I'm so glad that I read this. I'm so glad that I was able to participate in some way on the book tour. And I'm just really looking forward now to picking up the sequel. I think I'm going to read a couple of things in between this and that, just so I can space it out a little bit. But I don't want to go too far where I lose some memory, no pun intended, of what happened in the first book. So I just want to thank Black Crow PR again for sending this my way, introducing me to this glorious author, and I'm looking forward to reading much more in this world and other books as well that Justin Lee Anderson has and will come out with in the future. So yes, this has been my view of The Lost War. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall catch you in another video soon. Bye.